Welcome to Book Dive, the channel for exciting journeys into the world of books. I'm John On, and today we're diving into Atomic Habits by James Clear. Get ready for fascinating insights and ideas. Let's get started.
Yeah, this deep dive is going to be great. Clear's book is packed with so much practical wisdom on how tiny changes can lead to remarkable results over time.
You're right, and what really hooked me from the start was Clear's personal story. Imagine recovering from a horrific baseball injury in high school. We're talking broken bones, double vision, having to relearn how to walk. Most people would see that as a setback that defines their life.
It is fascinating how Clear didn't experience some sudden dramatic recovery. He emphasizes how it was a series of small wins consistently applied that ultimately led to his comeback. This idea that you don't need a grand transformation, just consistent tiny improvements, is something we can all apply to our lives.
Absolutely. And that's where the core of Atomic Habits comes in this four-step framework. Cue, craving, response, reward. It's like a recipe for understanding every habit, good or bad.
What's interesting is that Clear doesn't just describe this framework. He shows how we can manipulate each step to build better habits. It's not about forcing yourself, but about understanding the science and using it to your advantage.
So let's unpack one of the most powerful ideas from the book, the power of tiny gains and how they compound over time. Clear uses a simple analogy. Imagine improving just 1% each day. What kind of impact would that have over a year?
Well, the math is pretty astounding. Those tiny gains compounded over a year lead to an improvement of almost 37 times. Now think about that in the context of your own life. If you focus on getting 1% better each day at work, in your relationships, or in your health, imagine where you could be in a year.
It's like that snowball effect. Small actions repeated consistently gain momentum and lead to massive results. But on the flip side, Clear also warns about the danger of tiny losses. Those seemingly insignificant bad habits we all have, they compound negatively too.
Exactly. And that's a bit of a wake-up call for all of us. Think about your daily choices. Even something as simple as hitting the snooze button or grabbing fast food because you're tired. Are those choices putting you on the path of tiny gains or tiny losses? Are those habits building you up or slowly chipping away at your potential?
That's a great question for our listener to consider. What seemingly insignificant choices are you making each day that might be leading to tiny losses over time? But how do we actually make those positive changes stick? Clear says, forget goals, focus on systems.
This was a huge aha moment for me in the book. It's so easy to get caught up in setting goals, but Clear points out some major flaws with that approach. Goals can feel like temporary solutions. You hit a target, but if the underlying system that got you there hasn't changed, you're likely to slip back into old patterns.
And we've all experienced that happiness procrastination, right?
Yeah.
We tell ourselves, once I achieve X, then I'll be happy. Constantly pushing off contentment until some arbitrary milestone in the future.
And those goals often create an either-or conflict. Either you achieve it and feel successful, or you don't and feel like a failure. It's a limiting mindset. Instead, Clear encourages us to shift our focus to building systems, the processes and routines that lead to success.
It's about building a framework for consistent progress, not just chasing a fleeting finish line. And that's where identity-based habits come in, right?
Exactly. This is about understanding that your habits shape your identity and your identity shapes your habits. It's a feedback loop. So if you want to make lasting change, you need to start by changing your beliefs about who you are.
Instead of focusing on losing weight, you focus on becoming a healthy person. It's not just about exercising. It's about seeing yourself as someone who values fitness. This shift in self-perception can make sticking to those habits feel easier because it becomes part of who you are, not just something you're forcing yourself to do.
Think about it this way. If you identify as a healthy person, choosing a salad over a burger isn't a struggle. It's simply aligning your actions with your beliefs about yourself.
So we've laid the groundwork for why small changes matter and how systems trump goals. But how do we actually build those good habits and break the bad ones? This is where Clear introduces his 4 laws of behavior change. Make it obvious. Make it attractive. Make it easy. And make it satisfying. Let's start with making it obvious.
This is where we recognize the power of cues. These are the triggers that prompt our brains to initiate a behavior. So to make good habits more likely, we need to make those cues more obvious in our environment.
Clear calls this environmental design. It's about structuring your surroundings to support your desired habits. For example, if you want to eat healthier, you might rearrange your fridge to make healthy snacks more visible and tempting junk food less accessible.
It's also about being mindful of the hidden cues that might be subtly influencing your behavior. A cluttered workspace might subconsciously increase your stress levels, leading to procrastination or unhealthy coping mechanisms. Simply decluttering your space can make a difference.
And here's a quirky technique. Clear suggests pointing and calling. This is actually a method used by Japanese railway workers to reduce errors. It involves verbally announcing each action as they perform it. Imagine saying, I am now opening the refrigerator to choose a healthy snack.
It might sound a bit odd, but by verbalizing your actions, you bring a higher level of awareness to even the most automatic behaviors. You're essentially waking up your conscious mind and interrupting that autopilot mode.
So making it obvious is all about creating an environment where the cues for good habits are prominent and the cues for bad habits are minimized. But what about making those good habits more appealing? That's where the second law comes in, make it attractive.
This is where we dive into the neurochemistry of desire. Our brains are wired to seek out pleasure and avoid pain. It's all about dopamine, the brain chemical that fuels our cravings and motivations.
Okay, so how do we hack our dopamine system to work for us, not against us? How do we make those good habits more appealing and those bad habits less tempting?
One strategy Clear suggests is temptation bundling. This is where you link an action you want to do with an action you need to do. For example, you might allow yourself to listen to your favorite podcast only while you're exercising. You're essentially bribing your brain with something enjoyable to make that necessary task more appealing.
I love that idea. It's like giving yourself permission to indulge in something you enjoy, but only while doing something that benefits you in the long run. So what are some other ways we can make good habits more attractive?
Well, Clear argues that the modern food industry has become incredibly skilled at hijacking our dopamine systems. They figured out how to create hyper-palatable foods that push our cravings for salt, sugar, and fat beyond their natural limits.
Think about it. The irresistible crunch of chips, the refreshing fizz of soda, the creamy texture of chocolate. These are all carefully designed to maximize our pleasure and keep us coming back for more even when we're not hungry.
And this is why it can be so difficult to resist those unhealthy choices. We're not just battling our willpower, we're battling a multi-billion-dollar industry that's using sophisticated science to make their products as addictive as possible.
So how do we fight back against this manipulation? How do we make healthier choices more appealing when we're constantly bombarded with these tempting but ultimately unhealthy options?
One strategy is simply being aware of the tricks the food industry is using. Once you understand how they're manipulating your cravings, you can start to make more conscious choices. Instead of reaching for that bag of chips, maybe opt for some crunchy vegetables with hummus. You still get that satisfying crunch, but without the overload of unhealthy ingredients.
And Clear also emphasizes the power of social influence. We tend to adopt the habits of the people around us. So if you want to build better habits, surround yourself with people who embody those habits. It's about finding your tribe, the people who inspire you, support you, and help you stay on track.
He tells a fascinating story about Laszlo Polgar, a psychologist who raised his 3 daughters to be chess prodigies. They grew up immersed in a culture where chess was celebrated and valued, and all 3 daughters went on to achieve remarkable success in the chess world.
It's a powerful example of how our social environment can shape our habits and beliefs.
Yeah.
Because those girls were surrounded by people who loved and excelled at chess, it became a natural and appealing part of their lives.
So if you want to upgrade your habits, upgrade your social circle. Seek out people who share your values and aspirations. Surround yourself with those who are already living the way you want to live.
That's a great reminder that we're not in this alone. We can leverage the power of our social connections to support our growth and make those positive changes stick. So we've talked about making good habits obvious and attractive, but what about making them easier to do? That's where the third law comes in, make it easy.
This is all about reducing friction and making good habits as effortless as possible. Remember, our brains tend to gravitate toward the path of least resistance. So if we want to make a habit stick, we need to remove any obstacles that might prevent us from doing it.
Clear emphasizes the 2-minute rule. When you're starting a new habit, it should take less than 2 minutes to do. This sounds incredibly simple, but the idea is to make it so easy to get started that you're almost guaranteed to do it.
Instead of trying to run a marathon, start with a 2-minute walk. Instead of writing a novel, start with writing a paragraph. It's about lowering the barrier to entry and building momentum. Once you've established that consistent routine, you can gradually increase the duration or intensity.
It's like those gateway habits we've all heard about. Small actions that lead to bigger changes over time.
And in today's tech-savvy world, we can leverage automation to our advantage. Think about all the apps and devices that can help us make good habits more automatic. We can set reminders, track our progress, automate our savings block, distracting websites. The possibilities are endless.
Clear provides a great example of how he automated his writing process by using a scheduling tool to publish his blog posts at a specific time each week. This ensured consistent output and freed up his mental energy to focus on creating high-quality content.
So making it easy is about removing friction and leveraging technology to support your efforts. But what about making those good habits feel rewarding? That's where the fourth law comes in. Make it satisfying.
This is all about closing the loop and ensuring those good habits feel good, especially in a world where so many of our efforts yield delayed rewards. We work hard today for a paycheck we won't see for weeks. We exercise today for a healthier body we won't fully experience for months. Our brains crave that immediate gratification.
And that's where we can get creative. Clear suggests finding ways to add a little bit of immediate pleasure to those habits that pay off in the long run. Maybe it's listening to upbeat music while you're working out or rewarding yourself with a healthy treat after a productive work session. The key is to find rewards that are aligned with your goals and values.
So it's not about denying yourself pleasure. It's about aligning your rewards with your desired outcomes.
Exactly. Clea also highlights the power of tracking your progress. There's something incredibly satisfying about seeing those little wins add up over time. Whether it's marking an X on a calendar, filling in a habit tracker, or watching your savings account grow, that visual proof of your progress can be a powerful motivator.
It's a reminder that your efforts are making a difference, even if you don't see those dramatic results overnight.
And speaking of motivation, Clear suggests another interesting technique, the habit contract. This involves making a public commitment to your goal and setting up consequences for yourself if you don't follow through.
It's like putting skin in the game, making it more painful to break your commitment than to stick with it.
Clear shares a story about an entrepreneur who used a habit contract to help him lose weight. He made a public declaration of his goals and enlisted his wife and trainer as accountability partners. He even set up financial consequences for himself if he missed his workout or dietary targets.
Yeah. That takes commitment to a whole new level. But you don't have to go to such extremes. Even a simple agreement with a friend or family member to check in with each other on your progress can make a big difference. Just knowing that someone is watching can provide that extra push to stay accountable.
And that's what's so great about Claire's approach. He provides a framework, but he also encourages you to find what works best for you. It's about experimenting, being creative, and customizing these strategies to fit your unique needs and personality. Welcome back to our deep dive into Atomic Habits by James Clear. Last time we left off talking about making those good habits feel rewarding, but how do we keep that motivation going when things get tough?
That's a great question, and it's something Clear addresses head-on in the book. He introduces a concept called the Goldilocks rule, which is all about finding that sweet spot of challenge for optimal motivation.
Think of it like this. If a task is too easy, you get bored. If it's too difficult, you get frustrated and give up. But if it's just right, challenging enough to keep you engaged, but not so challenging that you feel overwhelmed, you hit that state of flow.
Flow. That feeling of being completely absorbed in an activity where time seems to fly by and you're totally in the zone. Athletes experience it, artists experience it, even people deeply engrossed in their work experience it.
Exactly. And Clear suggests the key to achieving flow is to consistently push your limits. Challenge yourself to get a little bit better each day. Imagine you're learning to play the guitar. If you keep practicing the same simple chords, you'll eventually get bored. But if you jump straight to playing complex solos, you'll likely get discouraged.
So it's about finding that balance.
Yeah.
Gradually increasing the difficulties so you're constantly learning and growing, but not so much that you burn out.
Precisely. And Clear emphasizes the importance of habit shaping, gradually scaling up the difficulty of a habit once it's established. Let's say you've mastered running for 2 minutes. Instead of trying to jump to running a mile, you might increase it to 5 minutes, then 10 minutes, and so on.
By gradually increasing the challenge, you keep things interesting. Avoid hitting plateaus and make consistent progress without feeling overwhelmed.
It's about embracing that journey of continuous improvement. But what about when that initial excitement of a new habit wears off? How do we stay motivated when boredom inevitably sets in?
We've all been there. You start a new diet with gusto, but a few weeks in, those salads start looking a lot less appealing. Or you commit to writing every day, but the blank page starts to feel more intimidating than inspiring. How do we push through those moments when motivation dips?
Clear shares a fascinating anecdote from his weightlifting days. He asked an elite coach who had worked with Olympic athletes what separated the best from the rest. And the coach's answer was surprising. He said, at some point it comes down to who can handle the boredom of training every day, doing the same lifts over and over and over.
That's such a powerful insight. It suggests that motivation and passion aren't some magical qualities that successful people possess. They feel the same boredom and resistance as everyone else.
The difference is they find a way to show up anyway. And Clear offers a few strategies for doing just that. One is to focus on the process, not just the outcome. Instead of getting fixated on that end goal, whether it's losing 20 pounds or writing a best-selling novel, find enjoyment in the day-to-day activities that are moving you toward that goal.
So it's about shifting your mindset from I have to I get to.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of dreading that workout, focus on how good it feels to move your body and get those endorphins flowing. Instead of stressing about finishing that chapter, savor the process of creating something new and exploring your ideas.
Exactly. And it can be helpful to break down large tasks into smaller, more manageable chunks. Instead of feeling overwhelmed by the prospect of writing a 50,000-word novel, focus on writing 1 page a day.
Those small wins, those tiny steps forward, can provide a sense of accomplishment and fuel your motivation to keep going.
And it's also crucial to reframe your thinking about boredom. Instead of seeing it as a negative emotion to be avoided, view it as an opportunity to cultivate patience and perseverance.
Clear argues that the ability to stick with a task even when it's not exciting is a hallmark of true professionals. Professionals show up consistently, regardless of how they feel. Amateurs let their emotions dictate their actions.
So if you want to achieve your goals, embrace those moments of boredom. They're a test of your commitment, your resilience, and your ability to stay the course even when it's not glamorous or thrilling.
It's about developing that mental toughness that allows you to keep pushing forward even when motivation wanes.
Now, another way Clear suggests we combat that inevitable boredom is through variable rewards. This is where we tap into our brain's love of novelty and surprise.
So instead of rewarding ourselves predictably, we keep those rewards unpredictable and inconsistent. It's kind of like those slot machines that keep people hooked because they never know when they're going to win.
Exactly. That unpredictability keeps things exciting. For example, if you're trying to establish a regular exercise routine, you might mix up your workouts to prevent boredom. One day you go for a run, the next day you hit a yoga class, and the next day you lift weights.
By keeping things fresh and unpredictable, you're less likely to fall into a rut. And you can also introduce variable rewards by occasionally treating yourself for sticking with your habits. Maybe buying yourself a new book after a month of consistent reading, or enjoying a nice dinner out after a week of staying on budget.
The key is to keep those rewards spontaneous. Don't reward yourself every single time. Make it a random occurrence to keep the excitement alive.
It's like adding an element of gamification to your personal growth, which can make the whole process more enjoyable and engaging.
And speaking of staying engaged, Clear also stresses the importance of reflection and review. This isn't just about analyzing what's working and what's not. It's about using that reflection to make adjustments, refine those habits, and experiment.
It's like adopting a scientist's mindset toward your own behavior, testing hypotheses, collecting data, and iterating based on the results.
Exactly. Remember, what works for one person might not work for another. We're all unique with different preferences, motivations, and lifestyles.
This reminds me of the biohacking movement, where people constantly experiment with their diets, sleep schedules, and exercise routines to optimize their performance.
There's a parallel there for sure. It's about taking an active role in shaping your habits and behaviors, using data and self-awareness to figure out what works best for you.
And I think this is especially important today when we're bombarded with so much information and advice about how to live our lives.
It's easy to get overwhelmed constantly chasing the latest fads or trends, but Clear's approach emphasizes finding what's sustainable for you, not what works for some guru or influencer.
It's about becoming the architect of your own habits, creating a system that's uniquely tailored to your needs and goals. But how do we ensure we're taking action and not just spinning our wheels in preparation?
Clear makes an important distinction between being in motion and taking action. It's easy to feel productive when we're busy planning, researching, or talking about our goals. But without concrete action, it's just procrastination in disguise.
Think about that classic example of someone who wants to write a book, but spends all their time attending writing workshops, researching publishing companies, and talking about their book idea.
They're in motion, but they're not taking action. No words are hitting the page. And this is where that 2-minute rule becomes so valuable. By breaking down those goals into tiny, actionable steps, you make it easier to shift from motion to action.
Instead of getting overwhelmed by the enormity of the goal, you focus on taking that first, almost ridiculously easy step. And that's often all it takes to break through inertia and start building momentum.
Clear shares how he struggled to floss regularly until he simply placed the floss right next to his toothbrush. That tiny change in his environment, removing that tiny bit of friction, made a big difference in his behavior.
It's a great example of how small changes in our environment can lead to significant changes in our habits. And this ties into the concept of priming, the idea that our actions are often influenced by subconscious cues in our environment.
Imagine you're trying to eat healthier. You could prime your kitchen by placing a bowl of fresh fruit on the counter, making it the first thing you see when you walk in. Or if you're trying to be more productive, create a dedicated workspace that's free of distractions.
By consciously designing your environment, you're setting yourself up for success by making those desired behaviors more automatic and appealing.
And this leads us to the idea of decisive moments, those pivotal points throughout the day where we make choices that can set the course for the rest of our day.
It's like those forks in the road. One path leads toward your goals, the other leads away. And often these decisive moments occur at the beginning of a chain of events where one small choice can set in motion a cascade of consequences.
Think about that moment when your alarm goes off. Do you hit the snooze button or get out of bed? That seemingly insignificant choice can impact your entire day. Hitting snooze often leads to feeling rushed and stressed, while getting up allows for a more relaxed and productive morning.
It's like those domino effects. One small choice triggers a series of actions that can either propel you forward or hold you back.
So the key is to be mindful of those decisive moments and make choices that align with your desired habits and outcomes. Be proactive, take control of those decision points, and consciously steer your day in the direction you want to go.
And that's where the power of identity really comes into play, right?
Absolutely. As Clear states, the ultimate form of intrinsic motivation is when a habit becomes part of your identity. It's about moving beyond simply doing things differently to becoming a different person.
So instead of focusing on what you want to achieve, focus on who you want to become. Do you want to be a healthy person, a productive person, a creative person? Your habits are the building blocks of that identity.
And that's what makes this process so powerful. It's not just about achieving specific outcomes, it's about becoming the best version of yourself.
It's a journey of self-discovery and self-transformation. And by understanding these principles, we can take control of that journey and create a future that's aligned with our deepest values and aspirations. Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into atomic habits. We've covered a lot of ground exploring how to build good habits. But let's face it, we all have those bad habits that we'd like to break free from.
Absolutely, and Clear provides some really practical strategies for tackling those negative patterns. He calls it inverting the 4 laws of behavior change. Instead of making it obvious, attractive, easy, and satisfying, we do the opposite. We make those bad habits invisible, unattractive, difficult, and unsatisfying.
It's like flipping the script on those unwanted behaviors, making them less appealing and more challenging to indulge in. So let's start with make it invisible. How can we make those bad habits disappear from our lives?
Well, it starts with identifying the cues that trigger those bad habits. Think about what triggers that mindless snacking or that endless scroll through social media. Is it seeing a bag of chips on the counter? Or hearing that notification chime on your phone?
Yeah, those cues are like little invitations to indulge in those unwanted behaviors.
Exactly, and the solution is to remove those temptations from your environment. If you don't see the chips, you're less likely to crave them. If you silence those notifications, you're less likely to get sucked into that digital vortex.
Out of sight, out of mind, right?
Yeah.
But what about making those bad habits less appealing? How do we make them unattractive?
One powerful strategy is reframing your thinking about those habits. Instead of focusing on the immediate pleasure they provide, shift your focus to the negative consequences. For example, if you're trying to quit smoking, don't dwell on how relaxing a cigarette would be. Remind yourself of how it's damaging your lungs, staining your teeth, and costing you money.
Oh yeah, it's like changing the narrative in your head, highlighting the drawbacks rather than the fleeting benefit.
Exactly. And this brings us to the third inversion, making it difficult. The idea is to increase the friction associated with those bad habits, making them harder to indulge in.
So if you're trying to reduce your social media use, maybe delete those apps from your phone. You're not cutting yourself off entirely, but you're adding an extra step, a moment of pause before you can indulge.
Yeah, that pause, that moment of friction can be enough to break the cycle of automatic behavior. It gives you a chance to reconsider, to make a conscious choice rather than mindlessly reacting to that impulse.
And finally, there's make it unsatisfying. This is where we want to strip away the rewards associated with those bad habits, making them less enjoyable.
Think about those habit tracking apps that allow you to set financial penalties for yourself if you slip up. That financial disincentive can be surprisingly effective, making those bad habits less appealing and more costly.
It's like a little sting to remind you that those choices aren't serving you.
Exactly. And Clear also suggests creating habit contracts. This involves writing down your goals, the consequences for not achieving them, and then having someone you trust hold you accountable. It's a way of formalizing your commitment and increasing the stakes.
It's like having a personal accountability partner, someone who supports you, but also keeps you honest. But what about staying motivated over the long term? How do we make those positive changes stick, especially when life throws us curveballs?
Well, Clear emphasizes the importance of designing flexible and adaptable systems. Life is unpredictable, and there will inevitably be times when our routines get disrupted, whether it's due to travel, illness, work deadlines, or family commitments.
It's those moments when it's easy to fall off track, to tell ourselves, I'll get back to it next week.
Yeah.
But Clear argues that the key to long-term success is to create systems that can bend without breaking.
Right. It's about building in some slack, allowing for flexibility, and having backup plans in place. So if your goal is to work out every day but you get sick, maybe your backup plan is to do some gentle stretching or go for a walk. Or if you aim to write every day but have a work deadline, adjust your writing schedule or aim for a shorter word count.
The key is to find ways to stay consistent without being rigid. It's about progress, not perfection.
Right. And Clear also highlights the importance of self-compassion. We're all human, and we're all going to make mistakes. The key is to learn from those mistakes and get back on track as quickly as possible.
Yeah, don't beat yourself up over those slip-ups. Just acknowledge them, learn from them, and move on.
Clear offers a simple but powerful piece of advice. Never miss twice. One slip-up doesn't have to derail your progress. The key is to avoid letting those missed opportunities turn into a pattern.
So if you miss a workout, don't wait until next week to get back to it. Get back to it tomorrow. If you overspend on your budget, don't abandon your financial goals. Just recommit to your plan with your next purchase.
It's about building resilience, developing that ability to bounce back from those setbacks. And that's where the power of identity comes in. When you see yourself as the type of person who sticks to their habits, those occasional slip-ups won't define you.
Yeah, it's a powerful shift in perspective. Viewing those slip-ups as temporary detours, not a reflection of your character.
Exactly. And that brings us to a really important point. Clear's approach to habit formation is about more than just achieving goals or being more productive. It's about creating a life that's aligned with your values, your aspirations, and your vision for yourself.
It's about using the power of habit to become the best version of yourself and to live a life that's meaningful, fulfilling, and joyful.
And it's a reminder that we're not just creatures of habit, we're creators of habit. We have the power to choose the habits that shape our lives and to use that power to create a future that's worthy of our dreams.
Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into Atomic Habits by James Clear. We've explored the power of tiny changes, the importance of systems over goals, the 4 laws of behavior change, and the transformative power of identity.
It's been a fascinating journey, and I hope our listeners are feeling inspired and empowered to start applying these principles to their own lives.
Thanks for watching Book Dive. If you enjoyed this, subscribe and turn on notifications to stay updated. Your support means the world to us. See you next time.